Hi everyone, it's Ileana and I have a card to share with you today. I'm going to be doing some watercolor, so I've already taped down my watercolor paper to my clipboard here, and I'm marking off where I want my watercoloring to be. I'm using cerulean blue from the Mission watercolors, and I've watered it down onto my palette so that it would be a little bit of a lighter blue. I'm using a silver brush. I think that's what it's called. One of my friends purchased this for me as a gift. And so I'm just laying down the sky. And I just basically want a rough rectangle of where the sky would be. And I'm going to be doing the same thing on the other side. And I know that the watercolor is going to lighten up once it's dry. So I'm going to go back and add a little bit more color to my watercolor paper. I'm making sure that my watercolor doesn't go past the pencil lines that I marked off, and I want to stamp that script in the background just very lightly, and so that's why I had marked off with pencil lines where that needed to go, because I don't want to do any repeat stamping. And I am setting that aside to dry. I'm just letting it air dry, and I'm going to move on to do my stamping. I'm going to be using Tailored Expressions zinnias. It's one of the stamp sets they had sent me that I did in one of my last videos. I've already die cut several pieces, and I'm just going to show you how you could use a MISTI to stamp those die cut pieces. I'm just going to take the first step, and I'm going to ink it up with some Altenew Forest Glades. And then I'll take that negative piece of the die cut, and I'm just going to line it up so that my image is centered. And then I'm just going to drop in my die cut. And I'm going to do that for both of the pieces that I've already die cut. And if you need to stamp again, it's still perfectly positioned and you can just re-ink it and get a darker impression. Now for the second layer, you just have to use a little imaging sheet, and so I've tucked it into the corner so it's in the same spot each time, and I'm stamping the second layer onto the imaging sheet. And now what I'll do is I'll take that negative die piece and then pop in my die cut, and then I'll just use that piece to line up the image. And then once I know that it's in place, I'll use my magnets to hold the negative space onto the MISTI, and then I could stamp the second layer. And I'm going to do that for both pieces. And now I'm going to do the flowers, the zinnias. And I'm stamping with Frost Pink, again with Altenew inks. And I like those because they've done all the guesswork for you and you don't have to think about what color matches. They provide you with 4 colors to work with, and they'll all coordinate. So I'm really glad that I had that. And so I'm just going to double stamp it so that it's a little bit darker because it's a really light pink. I'm going to do the same step for the second layer. I've tucked my imaging sheet into the corner, and I am making sure that the image is somewhere on that imaging sheet so that I could use my negative waste paper so that I could just manipulate it down without having to move the imaging sheet. I hope that makes sense. And I'm going to do that with all of the pieces. And I did make several dies just to have extra on hand and they're ready to go. I ended up making several of these cards. And the third layer I'm going to be using, well, the second layer was Coral Berry, and then my third layer is Grapevine. So I'm just lining it up, and then I use that corner piece of that negative cut to just drag it to where I need it. It may be easier if you stamped on your imaging sheet with a darker color, that way you could see it a little bit better, but it worked out fine for me. And now that my die cuts are done, I'm going to stamp that background, and this background is from Stampendous, and it was one that I bought years ago from Hobby Lobby, and I took it off the wood block and made my own cling stamp. I have some medical tape on the left and right side of that panel so that I don't get ink in that area, and I'm just going to use some broken china to create a subtle background. I had tried to do spray it with water, to spray the stamp with water and then let it sit and then try to remove some of the color, but it didn't work, so I used broken china instead. Now I'm just going to line up my die cuts so that I know exactly where it needs to be. I'm sorry, I thought I had my camera on when I did the sentiment, and I basically did the sentiment the same way. I stamped it on the imaging sheet, then I moved my card to where I wanted the sentiment to be, and then I used the magnets to hold it down, and then I stamped my sentiment. So now I am just adding foam adhesive to the back of the flowers, and I wanted to make sure that each one was stuck down before I went to the other one, and I did it so that the cluster is all together, and then that way when I go to add my stem, it's going to be positioned perfectly where I want it. It's all one piece. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add my multi-matte medium to the back of my stem because I want that to be flat. And what I decided to do last minute was to cut my panel down with a stitched rectangle border, but I had already adhered my flower to it, so what I ended up having to do was to remove the one zinnia that's on the far right. You'll see in just a second that that flower has been removed, and you'll know why I removed it. So I've taken a piece of black foam and I have backed it with some adhesive, and now I'm taking that foam and I'm adding more adhesive to the other side. I'm using some Allison Craft. It was actually a piece of fun foam that already had the adhesive, and then I added the Elizabeth Craft adhesive. And now I'm adding that zinnia back. The reason why I used fun foam on the whole piece was because the paper had been warped from the watercoloring and I wanted it to be as flat as possible. So I'm adding that flower back onto the card. By changing the sentiment, you could use this card in several ways, like maybe a Mother's Day card or a happy birthday card or thinking of you card. Now I'm going to be adding some Wink of Stella to the center of each flower and onto the leaves. You could probably add a little bit of stickles if you'd like, just to give it a little bit more dimension, but I thought the Wink of Stella just added a little bit of elegance to this card. And I made a couple of these cards, and they do look a little bit different because each of the background panels is different. And here's a little bit of a close-up of the card, and you can see that script in the background. This one here is a little bit different. I used a piece of pattern cardstock for the base. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure you give this video a thumbs up and head on over to our blog. Have a great day.